Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So we'll get started in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to wait for people to tune in before I get started. Please let me know if you can hear okay. I have my reading glasses on, so y'all have to excuse me. Um, but I'm going to give people a few minutes to tune in. And while you're waiting, I just want to encourage people to support my political campaign. As you all know, I'm running for Baltimore City Council, District 4, and I need your support. My campaign is about a blueprint for a better Baltimore. It's about ending the violence that's plaguing the community. It's about educating and empowering our youth. It's also about ending racial disparities in our community. So I encourage you all to donate to the campaign. I will post the link in the comments and in the description box to this video so that people can donate to the campaign. I need your support in order to be competitive. The election is June 2nd. It will be a mail-in ballot. So I really need people's support so I can do the mass mailings that I need to do. I need to raise about $4,000 to do what I need to do to send out the mail that I need to send out to the voters. So I hope that I can count on you for your support. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in and thank the people who have supported this campaign. Uh, a few people have donated to the campaign. I'm assuming that a lot of them are from YouTube, and I want to thank each and every one of you who have made donations. I truly appreciate it. It means the world to me. It means the world to me, and it will help us make a difference in this city. Before I get into this content, I just want to, emphasize that point. For the past 5 years, there have been over 300 murders in this city. And last year was the second deadliest year on record. We need candidates, politicians who are willing to address the core issues that lead to this violence that's plaguing our community. So again, I encourage people to support the campaign. But for right now, I want to get into this story that I heard of recently. And I will post links to all the articles that I rely on for this video. The links will be in the description box. So I encourage you to read these articles for yourself. But we have this story out of Brunswick, Georgia, where this black man who's 25 years old by the name of Ahmaud Arbery was jogging. He was jogging in a suburban neighborhood, and these two white men proceed to follow him. They get in their truck and they follow this brother. And then they confront this brother. Both of the guys, the white men, are carrying guns. And, they confront this brother. One person has a shotgun and one person has a 357. One is a father, a white man who's a father and his son. And they confront this brother. They chase him, assuming that he is a suspect. There had been some break-ins in the community, and they assumed that his brother fit the description, so they proceeded to chase him. They tell him to stop several times, and then they confront this brother. They claim that there was some kind of struggle over a shotgun, and this brother was killed during that struggle, shot twice by these people. And this happened back in February, but it's recently being reported because the prosecutor in the case decided not to proceed with the case for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to go into those reasons later. I'm going to read directly from this article, cite some points from this article, and John Pro said that the case reminded him of the Trayvon Martin case, and I'm going to talk about that as well, like whether or not this is similar to the Trayvon Martin case. Because a lot of people are drawing comparisons between the two cases for a lot of the obvious reasons, because here you have a situation where a young black man is presumed to be up to no good. You have these two people in this situation, one person in the Trayvon Martin case who took it upon themselves to pursue what they perceived to be a suspect, and they ended up killing that alleged suspect. And you know, in both situations, neither one of the people were police officers. So there are a few parallels, but I'm also going to get into like some of the differences between the two cases. So I'm going to read from this article, and unfortunately, this story is not getting enough attention. Like I've been watching CNN tonight, you know, just tuning in to find out what's going on, and they're talking about the coronavirus, which is very important. That's a very important issue, obviously. But that has been the focus, as many people have said, of the news, and they're not focusing on this situation in Georgia. And there will probably be way more attention focused on this situation in Georgia if it wasn't for the coronavirus situation. And I'm sure there would be massive protests going on and all that kind of stuff, bringing attention to this issue. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from this particular article and share my thoughts about this article after I read a few segments from it. You know, I want to shout out everybody that's tuning in. I truly appreciate you tuning in. Uh, I'm going to try to keep this broadcast short because I have some things that I have to do tonight. But here's what the story says. This is from the New York Times, and it says, Ahmaud Arbery loved to run. You know, and that's how this young brother stayed in shape, according to this article. He was a former high school football standout player. But it says that on Sunday afternoon in February, as Mr. Arbery ran through a suburban neighborhood of ranch houses, he passed a man standing on his front porch, who later told the police that Arbery looked like the suspect in a string of break-ins. The article goes on to say that Gregory McMichael, 64, called out to his son, Travis McMichael, 34. They grabbed their weapons, a .357 Magnum revolver and a shotgun, and jumped in a truck and began to follow Mr. Arbery. Stop, stop, they shouted at Mr. Arbery. We want to talk to you. Moments later, a struggle occurred over the shotgun, and Arbery was killed. He was shot at least twice, according to the police report. In this article, I'm going to post two articles. One of the articles has an actual copy of the police report so that you can read it for yourself. So obviously this situation is causing an uproar. You know, there's a movement online on Facebook where they're calling for an investigation. And I'll get into that a little bit later about the investigation. I encourage you to check out the article, and I'll also post a link to the Facebook page when I get a chance where they're advocating for his brother. This article goes on to point out that Mr. Arbery was killed 3 days before the anniversary of the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin, the unarmed African-American teenager whose confrontation with the neighborhood watch captain George Zimmerman helped ignite the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, this article goes on to say this. It says that the prosecutor who had the case for a few weeks told the police that the pursuers acted within the scope of Georgia's citizen arrest statute. And what I'm going to do is pull up that statute real quick and read what that statute says so that you all can know exactly what this statute is about. Just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, so this statute says that a private person may arrest. Let me start over. A private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempt to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. And what you'll find in this article, they claim that there was video footage of this suspect who had been breaking into people's homes, and these people claim that this person, Ahmaud Arbery, looks like the suspect in the video. So you have this prosecutor who's basically saying, well, he was acting. These people were acting within their rights under the Georgia citizens arrest statute. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later in this brief live stream, talk about that statute and share my thoughts about it. Also, the article says that the police report doesn't mention whether Mr. Arbery was armed or not. And, I think that the mere fact that it doesn't is probably, it probably means that, the brother probably was not armed or anything like that, because that would be the first thing that they would talk about. The first thing that they would mention is that this brother was armed, if he was in fact armed. That would be the first thing that the prosecutor would have brought up, if the brother was armed. That would have been the first thing that the police departments would have talked about, if the brother in fact was armed. So I doubt that this brother was armed. And it says the prosecutor wrote in a letter, he wrote a letter and he recused himself because the family complained about a conflict of interest. Shout out to Def Rocker. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. So because of this conflict of interest issue, now you have a prosecutor from another county in charge of the case. And that prosecutor will determine whether or not to bring this before a grand jury. So again, I'll post links to this Facebook group that is advocating for this brother. They're using hashtags such as I run with Ahmaud, justice for Ahmaud, and they have t-shirts and all that kind of stuff printed around this issue. And this article cites a coach from Brunswick High School who said there are a lot of people absolutely ready to protest, but because of the social distancing and the coronavirus situation, people are not protesting right now. And people claim, they're claiming in this article that this brother was out exercising, that he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was minding his own business. He wasn't committing any kind of crime or anything like that. Yeah, according to this report, they said he was wearing a white t-shirt, khaki shorts, Nike sneakers, and a bandana when he was killed. And this article goes on to say that everybody in the community knows that this brother likes to run. And let's see what else it says. And in his letter to the police, the prosecutor pointed out that this brother, Arbery, Mr. Arbery, had a criminal past. And this comes up all the time in these cases, whether it's a police shooting or it's one of these so-called citizens killing a black man. That's one of the first things that they want to do, pull up a criminal history. So I'm not familiar with that person that you mentioned. I think that was Def Rocker. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that person. I'm going to have to check that out. But anyway, the prosecutor is saying that this brother has a criminal past And again, that's what they often do when we have these police brutality cases or these situations where police or individual citizens kill a black person. The first thing they want to do is try to discredit them and dehumanize them, by bringing up criminal history and all that kind of stuff, as if that necessarily justifies brutality against black people. Shout out to Bonafide. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your support. So the records show that Mr. Arbery had been convicted of shoplifting and violating his probation in 2018. And it says that 5 years earlier, according to Brunswick News, he was indicted on charges that he took a handgun to a high school basketball game. So those are the allegations that are out there. And they're basically using this history to try to discredit this brother and dehumanize him. Shout out to Killer. I'm doing well. I hope that you and your, I hope everyone's being safe out there, practicing social distancing and not going out unless it's absolutely necessary. But let's continue on. And then this article points out that activists are taking a position that even if Mr. Arbery committed a property crime on the afternoon he was killed, that would not have warranted a chase by armed neighbors. And I think that that's a great point. I mean, part of the problem is the fact that you had this law in place. And, I'm going to go into that in a little, towards the end of this live stream. I want to talk about that issue. And someone wrote that this incident was at the least a case of overly zealous citizens wrongfully profiling a victim without cause. And these men felt justified in taking the law into their own hands. And in a lot of ways, like when I think about people feeling like justified and taking the law into their own hands, I think about all of those black people who were lynched. I think about, all those black people who were hung in trees, burned alive, castrated, subjected to brutality at the hands of lynch mobs. That's what I think about when I think about people taking their matters into their own hands. And this article goes on to say that Mrs. Cooper, who is Mr. Arbery's mother, believes that the men had judged her son based on the color of his skin. Because we have to remember, this is a suburb. And in a way, I mean, this is similar to Trayvon Martin. He was in a suburban type of environment, a gated community from what I recall. And sometimes people feel like if they see a black face in such environments, they assume that they don't belong. And, that kind of reminds me of like how I feel sometimes as a candidate, like when I'm campaigning and, in certain neighborhoods, like if I'm in one of these exclusive, high-end type of neighborhoods, I feel as if like, somebody may call the police and be like, what is this Negro doing in our gated community? But let me see what some people are saying before I go on. I see that Bonafide said the criminal history is absolutely irrelevant. There's no way these fiends who attack us could possibly know that when they pursue us like vicious, bloodthirsty predators. And that's a good point. Like, there's no way that they know all of the history and stuff like that. But in this particular situation, they're claiming that, this young brother looked like this suspect, this suspect who was allegedly captured on video. And even then, and I'm going to go into a lot of things later. I'm just going to get through this article real quick, and then I'll go into more detail a little bit later. But yeah, so you had a mother basically saying that she thinks that these guys judged her son based on the color of his skin. And I'm sure that to some degree that's true because, like, I'm sure the only thing that made that brother catch their attention is the color of his skin. That's probably the primary thing. You know, they're like probably thinking like, what is this black guy doing in our white neighborhood? And then when they look at him, they probably like, oh, he looks like that suspect. And then we know about this situation where often people are inaccurate in their descriptions of suspects and stuff like that. They may see an image and, you know, an image of a suspect and assume that that image applies to many black people, to the wrong black people. Like you'll have a photo of a suspect and then you have people identifying the wrong person as that suspect. Um, yeah, so let's get into this a little bit further. And this is the reason why the former prosecutor in the case was forced to recuse himself, um, because you know the family of the victim say that they learned that the prosecutor's son, let's see, yeah, was was a one of the prosecutors was previously, you know, the prosecutor's son was employed um, previously employed Gregory McMichael, and you know that's one of the people in this case. So you got a prosecutor's office that previously employed one of the suspects in this situation. So that's one of the reasons why this prosecutor was recused from the case. Now, this article goes on to say this. It says, in a separate document, the prosecutor, whose name is Mr. Barnhill, stated that a video exists of Mr. Arbery burglarizing a home immediately preceding the chase and confrontation. So this article is basically saying that there's video of this brother burglarizing a home right before this chase. So this basically is saying that these, you know, these white guys that chased this brother uh, were right in their assumption or their belief that he was the suspect in these break-ins. And it also says he cites a separate video of the shooting filmed by a third pursuer. So apparently there was a third person who was pursuing his brother who captured what happened on video, you know, according to this story in the paper. And it goes on to say this: Mr. Barnhill said that the video, which has not been made public, and I wonder why hasn't it been made public? Why hasn't this video been put out? He claims that the video shows Mr. Arbery attacking Travis McMichael after he and his father pulled up to him in their truck. It claimed, you know, the article goes on to say this: the video shows Mr. Arbery trying to grab the shotgun from Travis McMichael's hands. And that brings me to a point that I'm going to have to raise. I got to make a mental note of that. Um, and then it goes on to say he argued that this whole situation amounted to self-defense under Georgia law. So that's part of the reason why he decided not to bring charges against, you know, this white man who shot and killed his brother. And then this letter or whatever that this prosecutor wrote also went on to say this: Mr. Arbery may have caused the gun to go off by pulling on it. And then it also pointed to Mr. Arbery's mental health records. Now, it doesn't tell us anything about what these mental health records are or what they say or anything like that. It just talks about how his behavior, you know, is a result of his mental state. And it talks about how his mental records help explain his apparent aggressive nature and his possible thought pattern um, to attack the armed man. You know, it goes on to say this possibly explains why he would attack the armed man. All right, so this article goes on to talk about Mr. McMichael, Gregory McMichael, that's the father. It says that he worked for the police department between 1982 and 1989. Um, yeah, so that gives you a good amount of background information about this case. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. Like the one thing that I want to say is this, man. I think that there's a need for a thorough investigation. I'm glad that a new prosecutor is in charge of the case, a prosecutor who has no ties to these potential suspects. So that's good. I hope that they conduct a thorough investigation. And in order to make that happen, the people need to keep up the pressure on the prosecution to ensure that we have a thorough investigation. And I think that there needs to be transparency. And one of the ways that you create transparency is by letting the public know about the status of the investigation, by releasing the videotape that these people claim to have, that this prosecutor claims to have. If you release the actual footage and the actual proof, then people will have an idea of what actually happened. So that's one thing. I support, a full investigation of this matter. And then, I want to deal with this question about whether or not this is basically like the Trayvon Martin case. And before I do so, I want to check out this last comment that I saw. Just bear with me. Yeah, so I mean, it's just unfortunate that you had these situations. Shout out to Bonafide 1970. Um, yeah, but it's unfortunate that you had these situations where black people are summarily executed. But let me get into this. So the question is whether or not this is similar to Trayvon Martin. I pointed out some of the similarities. The question is whether this is just like the Trayvon Martin case. There are similarities. You have somebody who's not a police officer uh, chasing someone, tracking them down, accusing them of being a suspect, and you have a non-black person killing a black person, a young black man. So there are some parallels, but there are some differences. Unlike the Trayvon Martin case, like from what I recall, Trayvon Martin did not have a criminal record. There was some allegations out there about some possible things that he may have done, but he did not have a criminal record. Here you have a situation where there's a criminal record. Also, there's allegations that there's some videotape of this brother committing some crimes and all that kind of stuff. Um, and there's claims that there's videotape of this brother actually being the aggressor. So that makes the situation different. So if someone has a gun and then someone is struggling, trying to take that gun from them, uh, that may be a situation that arises to the level where someone is justified in defending themselves. Now, I want to see the video footage before I reach a conclusion as to whether or not, uh, these white men were defending themselves. But I will say this, one of the problems is this law, this whole law that entitles people or gives people the right to actually pursue people and arrest people. Giving regular citizens the right to do this. This is deeply problematic. And this brother probably would be alive today if it wasn't for Georgia's law that allows citizens to make an arrest. Because without that law in place, there would be no kind of explanation or justification for these people to be trying to pursue this brother. That is a matter for law enforcement. That's the way it should be, and that's the way it is in many states. Just like in that Florida situation involving Trayvon Martin, the that guy George Zimmerman, that murderer George Zimmerman, called the police when he was pursuing Trayvon Martin, and the police told him not to continue to pursue, but he did so anyway. So this law, this citizen arrest law, basically is giving people a license to kill black people, giving white people a license to kill black people. Because we already know, and I'll get to your comments a little bit later. I'm going to go back through the comments, but I just want to make these points. We already know that the police, with all their training, with all their expertise, with all their so-called social, cultural sensitivity training and stuff like that, despite all that training, we know about how the police regularly kill innocent black people, innocent black men in particular. We already know that despite all that training, a lot of these police are racially biased. We know that a lot of these police racially profile black men. We know that black men are victims of police brutality. In many cases, when there is no justification at all for the police to be aggressive, black men are killed by these police. So if you have a situation like that, where you have police departments, despite all their training, still targeting and killing black people, and then you create a law that gives the average citizen, somebody that's untrained, unskilled, somebody that is, in this situation, this person was a retired police officer or whatever, but that still doesn't take away from the point. People that are untrained, unskilled, who have all kinds of racial biases and bigoted attitudes and stuff, you're giving them a license to act like police. And we know that that bias, and that racism that a lot of these people harbor and have, is going to lead to the death of more black people. It's going to lead to situations like this. This should have been a matter where someone called the police and had the professionals take care of the situation. And this younger person, who shot and killed his brother, wasn't a retired police officer. He was just a regular citizen taking his brother's life. This whole thing wouldn't have even happened if these vigilantes didn't pursue this brother and simply made a call to law enforcement. The brother would have just been arrested, and then it would have been up to a court of law to decide whether or not he was guilty of these crimes that they accuse him of, instead of a situation where a private citizen is acting as judge, jury, and executioner. So that law has to be repealed. That law that gives citizens the right to make arrests, that law has to be repealed. And another law that needs to be repealed is that right to carry law that you have in Georgia. Without that law, these vigilantes wouldn't have been able to come outside of their house with guns, chasing a brother, and eventually killing that brother. It's one thing to protect yourself in your home. It's another thing for somebody to take on the role of a police officer, a private citizen taking on the role of a police officer and hunting and killing a black man. Those are two different things. So, that right to carry law needs to be repealed. And, that brings me to a couple of other points. This whole thing, this whole situation is just another reminder of how important elections are. You know, elections determine who's going to be the prosecutor. Elections determine who's going to be in your state legislature making the laws that affect people's lives, making laws such as this right to carry law, such as this citizen arrest law. That's why it's important to have the right elected officials in place. That's why it's important, so that you can create the right kind of laws, so that you don't have ridiculous laws like this in place that result in people losing their lives. That's why it's important to participate in the electoral process, so that we can affect the laws, so that we can change ridiculous laws like these. And you know, another way that people could change these laws, and probably overnight, is if black people were to take up arms and occupy, you know, these state houses in places like this where you had these open carry laws and these citizen arrest laws. If black people were to patrol white suburbs, or, you know, areas where you have white supremacists, and were to take it upon themselves to arrest white supremacists, they would change these two laws overnight. The state legislature would change these laws overnight, just like they did during the 60s when the Black Panther Party took over the state house and bore arms, you know, had an armed protest at the state house in California. They changed the laws overnight. So if we were to take that kind of militant type of action, they would change the laws overnight. And also, you would see like a stark difference in how law enforcement reacts to the situation. You know, when these right-wing nuts took over, you know, had these protests around the country, you know, calling for America to be reopened, you know, going to these protests with assault rifles. You know, those protesters were considered to be patriots by some of these people. Considered to be patriots. You know, police didn't arrest any of them. Police didn't take any kind of aggressive action. But let that be black people doing that, and you will see a whole nother reaction. So, you know, that's one thing that I wanted to point out, man. And another thing that has to be talked about is this situation. Like, even if this brother had a criminal record, that doesn't justify the police, well, not even the police, these private citizens trying to act as judge, jury, and executioner, killing his brother on the spot. That doesn't justify that. It doesn't justify them pursuing this brother. That should have been a matter for law enforcement. They should have called law enforcement and had law enforcement pursue that brother if he was in fact guilty of what they accuse him of. And the other thing is this, like with respect to that struggle over a gun. If some random person ran up on you with a gun and you don't know that this person is not a police officer, this person doesn't identify themselves, they just run up on you with a gun, you're going to do everything you can to fight for your life, to protect your life, even if that means struggling with that person to get the gun away from them. So in that circumstance, you are defending yourself. But then they flipped it and made it seem as if this brother was the person who was guilty and stuff. So this case raises a whole bunch of questions. You know, I'm going to continue to follow the case. You know, I hope that there's a thorough investigation of all the facts, and I hope that there's transparency so that the people are kept in the loop about the status of the investigation and the findings of the investigation. Because this is outrageous, man. You know, this situation is potentially, you know, a cause for protest and demonstration. But we have to see, you know, I'm going to wait until everything comes out before I, you know, take a certain type of position. You know, I'm not one of these people that just hops out here, you know, like some of these people have cocked without all the information and just start, you know, making proclamations and all that kind of stuff. Um, some of these people, you know, that get out here and do that kind of stuff, you know, these are the same people telling you not to vote. You know, even though I just explained how voting could affect a situation like this. Um, you know, some of these people are just, you know, concerned about entertaining people and getting ratings and views and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, let me go through your comments before I close out. You know, I want to thank the people for tuning in. Thumbs up the video, like the video, share the video. So let's see what people are saying before I head out. So Lonnie One Love said that she just heard about this story today. It's crazy. Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, this whole situation is crazy. I'm just like, no matter how often this happens, I'm still like shocked. Like when I first heard about this, a colleague was talking about it, and I was just like, wow, how could this happen, man? So you know, this prosecutor claims there's videotape. Show us the tape so that we can see it for ourselves and judge it for ourselves. So Cohen Davis said, exercising my right to carry, because that would cause white supremacists to think twice. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a point. Like, I mean, I think that is a point. If we are in a position to defend ourselves, you know, that will cause these people to think twice, man. It's just a shame that you had these situations. Like, if that brother was armed and he was able to defend himself, there may have been a completely different outcome in that situation. You know, I fully support the right to defend ourselves, but it's like I don't support the open carry law. You know, because I think all that does is promote more violence and bloodshed that's not necessary. Um, and if that law wasn't in place, you wouldn't have this situation. But I do believe that we have the right to bear arms. You know, I'm not against that. Um, Yeah, and I think that if people want to carry arms, you know, they need to be aware of the laws in their jurisdiction, you know, make sure that all their paperwork is in order and stuff like that, um, and that they are properly trained in how to use firearms and stuff like that. But people need to be aware of the fact that, you know, if you bear arms, you have to understand that these people are going to react to you completely different than the way they react to other people. Um, I'm just looking through the comments. Yeah, I fully support the right to self-defense. Yeah, we do analyze first and all that kind of stuff. That's a valid point, Cohen Davis. Um, but this situation is real interesting. I mean, this happened back in February, and here we are. It's almost May, and no charges have been filed. Let me straighten this out before it falls down. And no charges have been filed. And that was like that Trayvon Martin situation when Trayvon Martin was shot and killed. Like it took them quite some time to bring charges. And I don't believe like charges should just be bought automatically. You know, I think that there should be an investigation and stuff. Um, Shout out to Killer Side. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so I want to thank you all for tuning in. You know, I truly appreciate your support. And again, I encourage people to donate to my political campaign. I will post a link in the description box to this video. Um, you know, like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. Um, a lot of times people aren't even aware of when I'm posting my content. So hit that notification bell so that you'll know what's up. Um, and again, support my campaign. Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for your support. Be safe out there. Maintain your social distancing and stay home so that you can stay alive. Peace and blessings, everyone.